My mother-in-law demanded I pay $8,000 for my fiancé's rehearsal dinner. When I refused, she called the courthouse and threatened to sue. I didn't panic. I pulled out my phone, smiled, and read the document aloud at the wedding venue. Everyone heard that she had already been ordered to pay me. His lawyer dropped everything. Let me tell you how we got here. We were standing in the event coordinator's office at the Hilton Garden Inn on Route 9, fluorescent lights humming overhead, the smell of stale coffee and carpet cleaner thick in the air. My fiancé, Michael, sat between us, his hands folded on the oak veneer table. His mother, Alina, wore her cream Talbot's blazer, the one she saved for occasions when she wanted to project authority. She had her checkbook out. She'd been waving it around for the past 6 minutes. I'd been quietly taking notes on my iPhone. The story actually starts 3 years earlier, in October of 2021, when I first met Alina at Michael's cousin's wedding in Greenwich. I was working as a compliance analyst at a mid-sized insurance company in Stamford, making $47,000 a year. Alina asked me what I did, and when I told her, she said, "Oh, how nice. Paperwork." Then she turned to talk to someone else. Michael apologized later in the car. I told him it was fine. It wasn't fine, but I was used to it. My family wasn't wealthy. My father worked for the county highway department for 32 years. My mother managed a dental office. They saved enough to help me through community college, then I finished my bachelor's at night while working full-time. It took me 6 years. Alina's family owned a chain of medical supply distributors across Connecticut and Massachusetts. She'd never worked a job where someone else decided her schedule. At Thanksgiving that year, Alina mentioned she was looking at investment properties. "The market's shifting," she said, passing the sweet potatoes. "People with capital can really position themselves now." She looked at me. "Do you have any investments, Sarah?" I had $1,100 in a savings account and $18,000 in student loans. "Not yet," I said. Michael's sister Jennifer laughed. "Sarah's still figuring out her career path." I was 28 years old. I had a career, it just wasn't one they respected. By Christmas, I'd started studying for my Series 65 exam. I didn't tell Michael. He would have told his mother, and she would have had opinions. I studied at the Starbucks on High Ridge Road every morning before work, 5:30 to 7:15, same table by the window. The barista started making my coffee automatically. Tall blonde roast, room for cream. I passed the exam in February 2022. I registered my investment advisor representative status in March. I started building a client list through word of mouth, people I'd worked with at the insurance company, friends of friends who needed basic financial planning. Nothing dramatic. I was bringing in an extra $1,500 a month by May, $2,200 by August. Alina still thought I was just doing paperwork. At Michael's birthday dinner in June, Alina announced she'd purchased a second rental property in Norwalk for $450,000. "The tenants are paying $2,800 a month," she said, cutting her salmon. "It practically pays for itself." Michael congratulated her. Jennifer asked intelligent questions about cap rates and appreciation potential. Alina looked at me. "This probably doesn't make much sense to you, Sarah. Real estate investing is fairly complex." "It sounds like a good investment," I said. I'd bought my first rental property 3 weeks earlier. A foreclosure in Bridgeport, purchased for $92,000 cash. I'd saved every dollar from my advisory work, lived off my salary, and built up enough to close without financing. My tenant was paying $1,400 a month. The mortgage would have been $700 if I'd needed one, but I didn't tell Alina that. Not yet. By September, I'd left the insurance company. I'd built my advisory practice to the point where I was making $6,800 a month in fees, and I couldn't manage both jobs anymore. Michael knew I'd quit, but I told him I was doing consulting work. He didn't ask for details. Alina heard I'd left my job and said, "Well, I hope you have a plan." She said it the way you'd talk to a teenager who just announced they were dropping out of high school to become a musician. I had 3 rental properties by then. My advisory practice had 42 clients. I was on track to gross $97,000 that year. At Thanksgiving 2022, Alina brought up my employment status again. "Have you found something stable yet, Sarah?" "I'm working independently," I said. "Oh." She set down her wine glass. "So you're between jobs." Jennifer, who worked in HR for a pharmaceutical company, offered to look at my resume. "I could probably get you an interview for an admin position. They start around $52,000. I had $118,000 in my business checking account at Webster Bank. I had equity in 3 properties worth a combined $135,000 after mortgages I didn't have because I'd paid cash. My Q3 revenue had been $31,000. That's really kind of you, I said. I'll keep it in mind. Michael's father, Richard, who rarely spoke during these dinners, looked at me for a long moment. Then he went back to his turkey. I didn't know it yet, but Richard had made the decision that would cost Alina everything. Michael proposed to me in January 2023 at the Maritime Aquarium in Norwalk, next to the seal exhibit at 2:47 in the afternoon. It was perfect. We set the date for October 14th, 2024, because that's when the venue we wanted, a restored barn in Roxbury, had availability. Alina immediately took control of the planning. She had opinions about everything. The invitations should be engraved, not printed. The flowers should be imported, not local. The photographer should be someone who'd shot at least 3 weddings featured in Connecticut magazine. I agreed to most of it because Michael wanted his mother happy, and I was busy. I'd brought on my first employee, a junior advisor named Marcus who'd just gotten his certifications. I'd purchased my 4th property, a duplex in West Haven, for $115,000. I was managing 87 advisory clients. I'd registered an LLC for the practice in March and hired an accountant. In May 2023, Alina announced she wanted to host the rehearsal dinner. Traditionally, the groom's family handles this, she said. We were at her house in Darien, the one with the circular driveway and the professionally landscaped yard that required a service to maintain every week for $900 a month. That's wonderful, I said. What were you thinking? I've been looking at venues. The Delamere in Greenwich has a private dining room that seats 60. With the menu I'm considering and an open bar, we're looking at around $8,000. Michael said that seemed high. Alina said quality costs money. She looked at me. Unless you'd prefer somewhere more modest. The room got quieter. I'd been to the Delamere. It was beautiful. It was also exactly the kind of place Alina would choose specifically because she knew it would make me uncomfortable, would remind me that I came from families who did rehearsal dinners at the local Italian restaurant with a $100 deposit. The Delamere sounds lovely, I said. Perfect. I'll make the arrangements. She smiled. Of course, traditionally, if the bride's family wants to contribute, that's always appreciated. My father's annual pension was $41,000. My mother was still working, making $38,000 at the dental office. I'm sure we can discuss it, I said. I wasn't going to ask my parents for money. I had $207,000 across my business and personal accounts. But Alina didn't know that. In July, Alina called me. Sarah, I need to talk to you about the rehearsal dinner budget. Okay. The final number is coming in higher than expected. With the wine pairings and the seafood options I've selected, we're at $9,400. I think it's only fair that your family contributes half, $4,700, for one dinner. I'll need to talk to my parents, I said. Of course, but I need to know by next week. The Delamere requires a deposit. I didn't talk to my parents. I called my lawyer instead. Her name was Patricia Volpe, and I'd hired her 6 months earlier to help structure my growing practice. She charged $375 an hour, and she was worth every penny. Can she actually require my family to pay? I asked. Patricia laughed. Require? No. Socially pressure? Apparently yes. But Sarah, why don't you just tell her you can afford it yourself? Because I'm not ready yet. When will you be ready? Soon. By August 2023, my practice was on track to gross $147,000 for the year. I'd promoted Marcus and hired a second advisor. I'd purchased 2 more properties, including a small commercial building in Milford that I'd gotten for $190,000 at auction. My rental income alone was covering my personal expenses. I was building something real, something sustainable, something that would outlast whatever opinions Alina had about my worth. Michael and I had moved in together in April, into a condo I'd purchased in Fairfield for $380,000. I'd put down $250,000 cash. The mortgage was $893 a month. Michael contributed half. He thought we'd gone a great deal through my consulting contacts. He didn't know I was the sole name on the deed. Alina came to visit in September. She walked through the condo, touching the granite countertops, examining the crown molding. This must have cost a fortune to rent, she said. We're comfortable, I said. Still, with your situation? She trailed off meaningfully. My situation. I was 31 years old. I owned 6 properties outright worth a combined $947,000. My practice managed $4.2 million in client assets. I had 2 employees and was in conversations to acquire a smaller practice from a retiring advisor, which would add another 68 clients and 1.8 million in assets. We manage, I said. I noticed Alina had stopped eating the cookies I'd set out. She did that when she was calculating something. We'd been there for 43 minutes. The rehearsal dinner issue came up again in October. Alina called on a Tuesday evening, 7:15. Sarah, I need a decision about your family's contribution. I've been thinking about that, I said. What if Michael and I just handle the rehearsal dinner ourselves? Silence. 4 full seconds. That's not how this works, Alina said. Her voice came out different. Tighter. The groom's family hosts. That's tradition. I've already made arrangements with the Delamere. I've selected the menu. I've invited our friends and family. What I need from you is $4,700 from your side. I understand, but, Sarah, I'm trying to be generous here. I'm paying more than half. I'm doing all the work. All I'm asking is for your family to contribute their share. Unless, she paused, unless that's not possible financially. She knew it wasn't, or she thought she knew. Let me talk to Michael, I said. I didn't talk to Michael. I called Patricia again. If she's already booked and paid deposits and she's claiming my family agreed to split costs, could she actually take us to small claims court? Did your family agree to split costs? No, but she's been saying it's traditional and expected. She's been telling people at the wedding that both families are hosting. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Has she put anything in writing? Email. She sent me the menu options and wrote, let me know which selections your side prefers for your portion of the evening. Save that email, save everything. If she's telling people your family committed to payment when they didn't, that could be a problem for her, not you. I saved everything. At Thanksgiving 2023, Alina brought it up in front of the entire family. We were at her house, 14 people around the extended dining table. The conversation had moved to wedding planning, which Alina controlled like a military operation. The rehearsal dinner is going to be spectacular, she announced. I've spared no expense. Of course, Sarah's family is contributing as well. My father, who'd been quiet all evening, looked up. I'm sorry, what? The bride's family typically contributes to the rehearsal dinner, Alina said smoothly. It's customary when both families want to be involved. My mother's face went pale. She knew our financial situation. She knew $4,700 wasn't possible. We weren't aware, my father started. It's fine, I said. We'll handle it. Alina smiled. Wonderful, I'll send Sarah the information for the payment. After dinner, my mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. Honey, we can't afford that. Your father's knee replacement is scheduled for January. The insurance doesn't cover everything. I know, Mom, don't worry about it. I'm taking care of it. But Sarah, that's so much money. How can you? I'm taking care of it. She looked at me for a long moment. What aren't you telling me? Nothing. I promise, just trust me. I didn't know that same week, Richard had met with his estate attorney. I didn't know he'd made changes to his trust that would matter later. I didn't know he'd specifically structured something that would protect me and destroy Alina's assumptions. By December 2023, the practice acquisition was complete. I now managed 119 clients with $6.1 million in assets under management. My annual fee income would hit $238,000 for 2024. I'd hired a third advisor and rented office space in a professional building in Stamford. The sign on the door read, Brightwater Financial Advisory Group, LLC. Sarah Mitchell, principal. Alina had driven past that building 100 times. She'd never noticed. In February 2024, Alina escalated. She called me on a Wednesday morning, 9:43. Sarah, I need the payment for the rehearsal dinner by the end of the month. The Delamere's policy requires final payment 60 days before the event. Alina, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. My parents can't contribute $4,700. It's not feasible for them. Then you'll have to cover it yourself. I'm not paying $4,700 for a dinner you planned without discussing the budget with us first. Her voice went cold. So you're backing out of your commitment. I never committed to anything. You assumed. I have emails. I have witnesses. You agreed your family would participate in hosting. Participating doesn't mean paying specific amounts that were never negotiated. If your family doesn't pay their share, I will cancel the entire rehearsal dinner. I will tell everyone at the wedding that the bride's family refused to honor their obligations. I will make sure people know exactly what kind of family Michael is marrying into. I was in my office. Marcus and the other advisors were in the conference room with a client. Through the glass wall, I could see them presenting a retirement strategy, charts on the screen showing projected growth over 20 years. Do what you think is necessary, I said. I will take you to court if I have to. Small claims. I'll get a judgment for the costs I've incurred based on your family's promise to pay. I'd like to see you try. She hung up. I sat there for a moment, looking at my phone. Then I called Patricia. She's threatening to sue? Patricia said. Yes. Based on what? Verbal agreements that don't exist? She has emails where she discussed both families hosting. I never explicitly agreed to dollar amounts, but I also didn't explicitly disagree until now. That's not a contract. That's wishful thinking on her part. If she wants to file, let her file. But Sarah, Patricia paused. You're 8 months out from marrying this woman's son. Is this really how you want to start? I'm not starting it, she is. Okay, but you're sitting on $6 million in managed assets and you're arguing about a rehearsal dinner payment. At some point, you're going to have to tell them who you actually are. I know. When? Soon. I went home that night and told Michael his mother had threatened legal action. He was stunned. She what? She said if we don't pay $4,700, she'll sue us and cancel the rehearsal dinner. That's insane. I'll talk to her. Don't. Let her do what she's going to do. Sarah, this is my mother. I can't just… Michael, I looked at him. Let her do what she's going to do. He stared at me. I think part of him understood in that moment that there was something he didn't know, something I'd been holding back. But he didn't push. In March 2024, Eleanor made good on her threat. She filed in small claims court, New Haven County. The claim was for $8,347, the full cost of the rehearsal dinner she'd planned, not just the half she'd initially demanded. Her argument was that by agreeing to participate in hosting, and by selecting menu preferences, my family had entered into an implied contract for payment. The summons arrived on March 28th. I was home when the process server came. Michael was at work. I signed for it, read it, and took photos of every page. Then I called Patricia. She actually filed. I see that. I'm looking at the electronic filing now. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Sarah, she's going to lose this case. You know that, right? She has no contract, no written agreement, nothing but her own assumptions. But she's going to lose it in court in public with your fiancé's family watching. Good, good. She's been underestimating me for 3 years. She's been dismissing me, patronizing me, making assumptions about my worth. She wants to go to court? We'll go to court. Okay. Patricia's tone shifted. She wasn't my friend anymore, she was my lawyer. Then we're going to need documentation. Every email, every text, every conversation you can remember. We're going to build a defense that doesn't just win, it embarrasses her. I sent Patricia everything. Every email where Eleanor had discussed the rehearsal dinner. Every text, every voicemail. Patricia organized it chronologically, built a narrative. But that wasn't all I gave her. I want you to prepare something else, I said. A financial disclosure. Of your assets? Yes, property holdings, business valuations, managed assets, everything. I want documentation that shows exactly who I am and what I've built. I don't want to submit it to the court, I want it ready in case I need it. In case you need to prove you could have paid for the dinner 10 times over? Exactly. Patricia prepared 2 sets of documents. The defense against Eleanor's claim, which was straightforward, no contract existed, no agreement had been made. Eleanor had planned an event based on her own assumptions and was now trying to force payment. And the financial disclosure, which detailed 6 properties worth $947,000 owned free and clear, a practice managing $6.1 million in client assets, projected annual income of $238,000, and total net worth of approximately $1.3 million. I was 32 years old. We had the hearing scheduled for June 18, 2024. Small Claims Court, New Haven, Judge Patricia Romano presiding. Eleanor showed up with her own lawyer, a guy named Kenneth Pritchard who did estate planning for wealthy families in Fairfield County. $350 an hour, based on what I'd heard. Michael came with me. He'd begged his mother to drop the case. She'd refused. It's the principle, she'd told him. I won't be taken advantage of. My parents came too. They sat in the back row, confused and worried. They still thought I was barely scraping by. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Judge Romano was in her 50s, efficient, no nonsense. She'd been on the bench for 11 years. Eleanor's lawyer went first. He presented the case as a simple matter of implied contract. Your Honor, the plaintiff made arrangements for a significant family event in good faith, believing the defendant's family would share costs as is customary and as was discussed in multiple communications. The defendant's family selected menu options, confirmed attendance, and participated in planning. Having incurred costs based on these understandings, the plaintiff now finds herself solely responsible for expenses that should have been shared. He submitted the emails. The ones where a leaner had sent me menu options and I'd made comments. The fish looks good. My parents prefer chicken, things like that. The defendant's participation in these discussions constitutes acceptance of shared financial responsibility, Pritchard argued. Custom and tradition support the expectation that both families would contribute to this event. Judge Romano looked at the emails. Ms. Mitchell, what's your response? I stood. Patricia stood with me. Your Honor, I never agreed to pay for anything. Mrs. Preston made assumptions about what my family would contribute. She planned an expensive event without discussing budget with us, then demanded payment after the fact. There's no contract here, there's just her expectation. The emails show you participated in planning, Judge Romano said. Yes, because I thought she was hosting it, which is what she initially told us. When she started demanding money, I declined. That's my right. Pritchard jumped in. Your Honor, the defendant has been evasive about her family's finances throughout these discussions. She's led the plaintiff to believe they couldn't afford to contribute, which influenced the plaintiff's decision to move forward with the event. If the defendant had been forthcoming about her financial situation, what financial situation? Judge Romano interrupted. And that's when I nodded to Patricia. Your Honor, Patricia said, we'd like to submit additional documentation. Not as part of our formal defense, but to address opposing counsel's characterization of my client's alleged evasiveness about finances. She handed a folder to the bailiff, who handed it to Judge Romano. Elinor's lawyer looked confused. Your Honor, we weren't provided with this in discovery. It wasn't necessary for our defense, Patricia said, but since Mr. Pritchard raised the issue of my client's financial situation, we thought it relevant to clarify. Judge Romano opened the folder. She looked at the first page, then the second, then she looked up at me. Ms. Mitchell, is this accurate? Yes, Your Honor. You own 6 properties free and clear? Yes, Your Honor. You manage a financial advisory practice with $6.1 million in client assets? Yes, Your Honor. Your net worth is approximately $1.3 million. Yes, Your Honor. The courtroom went dead silent. I heard someone's papers rustle in the back. A phone buzzed somewhere and nobody moved to silence it. Elinor turned white, not pale, white. The color drained from her face in approximately 3 seconds. Her mouth opened slightly. Her hand, resting on the table in front of her, started to shake. Michael stared at me. His expression was complicated: confusion, shock, something that might have been pride, something that might have been hurt that I hadn't told him. Judge Romano looked at Elinor's lawyer. Mr. Pritchard, your client is suing because she believes the defendant couldn't afford to contribute to a rehearsal dinner. Pritchard was reading the documents now. His face had gone red. Your Honor, we weren't aware. Ms. Mitchell, Judge Romano said, could you have afforded to pay for the entire rehearsal dinner? Yes, Your Honor. So why didn't you? Because she never asked me to. She demanded my parents pay. My parents, who are retired and on a fixed income. She assumed we were poor, assumed we were beneath her, and tried to humiliate us into paying for an event she planned without our input. When I refused to let her bully my family, she sued. Elinor made a sound, not words, just a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Judge Romano closed the folder. Mrs. Preston, did you know the defendant owned a financial advisory practice? Elinor couldn't speak. She shook her head. Did you discuss a budget for this rehearsal dinner with the defendant's family before booking the venue? Another head shake. Did the defendant or her family ever sign anything agreeing to pay for this event? No, but Elinor found her voice. It came out hoarse. It's traditional. The bride's family is supposed to. Traditional is not contractual, Mrs. Preston. Traditional doesn't create legal obligations. Judge Romano looked at the papers in front of her. You made assumptions. You planned an expensive event. You tried to force someone to pay for your assumptions. And apparently, you did all of this while fundamentally misunderstanding who you were dealing with. She looked at Pritchard. Motion dismissed. Mrs. Preston, you're responsible for your own court costs. If you'd done 10 minutes of research before filing this claim, you would have known Ms. Mitchell owns a registered business that's publicly documented with the state. This was preventable. The gavel came down. Elinor stood up too fast. The chair scraped backward. She grabbed her purse, fumbled with it, and I saw her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't close the clasp. Pritchard tried to speak to her. She ignored him. She walked toward the exit, moving too quickly, her heels clicking on the floor. She didn't look at Michael. She didn't look at anyone. Michael followed her. Mom, she held up her hand. She was crying now, I realized. Not loud, just tears running down her face, her breathing ragged. Don't, she said. She left. My parents came forward. My father looked stunned. Sarah, what just happened? I'll explain later. My mother was staring at the documents Judge Romano had left on the table. You own properties? You have a business? Yes. Why didn't you tell us? Because I needed to do it myself, without help, without expectations, without anyone's opinions. I looked at them. I needed to know I could build something real. My father nodded slowly. I think he understood. My mother hugged me hard. Michael was outside on the courthouse steps when I came out. Alina was gone. I saw her Mercedes pulling out of the parking lot, driving too fast, weaving slightly. You've been hiding this for 3 years? Michael said. Yes. Why? Because your mother has been treating me like I was worthless since the day we met. She dismissed everything I did, every job I had, every goal I mentioned. She made assumptions about who I was based on my parents' income and my background. I wanted her to see what those assumptions cost her. You humiliated her in court. She sued my family for $8,000. She threatened to ruin our wedding because we wouldn't let her bully us into paying for her party. She got what she earned. Michael was quiet for a long moment. Cars drove past on Church Street. It was 2:40 in the afternoon. The sun was bright, almost too bright. I had to squint to look at him. Did you ever plan to tell me? He asked. Yes, eventually, when it felt right. It didn't feel right 3 years ago, 2 years, last year? No, he nodded. I need some time. Okay. He walked to his car. He didn't kiss me goodbye. He just left. I stood there on the courthouse steps for 8 minutes. Patricia came out and stood next to me. You okay? She asked. I don't know. You just won. Did I? She didn't answer. 3 weeks later, my fiancé and I were supposed to meet the event coordinator at the Hilton Garden Inn to finalize details for the wedding reception. Alina had insisted on coming. I'm still the mother of the groom, she'd said when Michael called to tell her we were meeting. I have a right to be involved. Michael had asked me if it was okay. I'd said yes. I'd said a lot of things to Michael in those 3 weeks. I'd explained the full scope of what I'd built, how I'd built it, why I'd kept it quiet. He'd listened. He'd been hurt, then angry, then something like understanding. We were still together. We were still getting married in October. But something had shifted. Some trust had been damaged. Alina arrived 12 minutes late. She looked different, thinner maybe, or just harder somehow. She sat down at the table without greeting anyone. The coordinator, a woman named Jennifer Chen, went through the checklist. Flowers, confirmed. Photography, confirmed. DJ, confirmed. Catering, confirmed. Bar service, confirmed. Now the rehearsal dinner, Jennifer said. I understand there was a venue change. Alina's jaw tightened. After the court case, she'd canceled the Delamere reservation. Michael had scrambled to book something else, a nice Italian restaurant in New Haven, Consiglio's, family-owned, 50 people maximum, $2,800 all in. I'd offered to pay for it. Michael had said no. His father Richard had stepped in and handled it. It's confirmed, Michael said. We're all set. Perfect. Jennifer made a note. Then she looked up. Oh, and I meant to mention the deposit for the reception. We received it last week. $15,000. That was generous of you. Alina's head snapped up. 15,000? Jennifer checked her computer. Yes, paid in full on June 24th by, she squinted at the screen, Brightwater Financial Advisory Group. Michael looked at me. You paid for the reception? I paid the deposit, yes, I thought it would help. He stopped. Sarah, you didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Alina was staring at me now. Her expression was complicated. Not angry exactly, something else. Something that might have been the first glimmer of understanding that she'd misjudged every single thing about me from the beginning. Well, Jennifer said cheerfully, oblivious to the tension, the reception is all set. The rehearsal dinner is confirmed. I think we're in great shape for October 14th. The meeting ended 15 minutes later. Alina left without saying goodbye. In the parking lot, Michael stopped me. My father wants to talk to you. About what? He wouldn't say, but he wants to meet. Just you, Richard Preston called me that evening. Sarah, I'd like to take you to lunch tomorrow if you're available. 1 o'clock at the Silverman Tavern in Norwalk. Can I ask what this is about? It's important, please. I met him at 1 o'clock. The restaurant was quiet, white tablecloths and dark wood beams, the kind of place where businessmen had meetings and sealed deals. Richard was already there, sitting at a corner table, wearing a gray suit and a burgundy tie. He stood when I arrived. Shook my hand formally. We ordered salmon for me, steak for him, and made small talk about the weather and the wedding until the food arrived. Then Richard set down his fork and looked at me. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to keep it between us for now. Okay, I've been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, stage 3. My oncologist gives me 12 to 18 months. I felt something drop in my chest. Richard, I'm so sorry. Thank you. I'm telling you this because I've made changes to my estate plan, and those changes affect you. I didn't understand. Affect me how? Eleanor and I have been married for 37 years. We built the medical supply business together. I was operations, she was finance. When I die, my share of the business goes into a trust. Half of that trust is designated for Michael. The other half, he paused, I'm designating as a minority stake gift to you personally, with the stipulation that you have full voting rights equal to Eleanor's shares. I stared at him. Why would you do that? Because I've watched Eleanor dismiss you for 3 years. I've watched her treat you like you were beneath our family. And I've watched you quietly build something remarkable without anyone's help, without anyone even knowing. That takes character. That takes discipline. He leaned forward. My son is marrying someone extraordinary, and his mother can't see it because she's too busy protecting her own sense of superiority. When I'm gone, Eleanor will try to maintain control of the business. She'll make decisions based on her ego, not strategy. I need someone in that room who can challenge her. Someone she underestimated who turned out to be smarter than she thought. Richard, you'll receive the documentation after I pass. My attorney has everything prepared. Eleanor doesn't know yet. She thinks the business will be hers to control completely. It won't be. We sat there for a long moment. My salmon was getting cold. His steak was barely touched. Does Michael know? I asked. About the cancer or the trust? Both. Neither. I'm telling him about the diagnosis this weekend. The trust details will remain sealed until after I'm gone. That's how I've structured it. He's going to be devastated. I know. Richard's eyes were wet. But he has you. That's going to matter more than he realizes right now. Richard Preston died 14 months later, in August 2025, 2 weeks before what would have been his 63rd birthday. The funeral was at St. Luke's in Darien, 200 people in attendance. Eleanor wore black Chanel and maintained perfect composure throughout the service. The will reading was scheduled for September 5th at the offices of Whitmore and Associates in Stamford. Present, Eleanor, Michael, Jennifer, me, and 3 lawyers. The estate attorney, David Whitmore, was 71 years old and had worked with Richard since 1989. He read through the preliminaries. The house in Darien went to Eleanor, the vacation property in Vermont split between Michael and Jennifer, various personal items distributed to family members. Then he got to the business holdings. Richard's 51% ownership stake in Preston Medical Supply Distribution is to be transferred into the Preston Family Trust. From this trust, 25% of total company ownership will be designated to Michael Preston. 25% will be designated to Sarah Mitchell Preston. Eleanor's face went blank. What? The remaining 1% is designated for charitable distribution as outlined in Section 7. Eleanor Preston maintains her existing 49% ownership stake. This is a mistake, Eleanor said. Her voice was sharp, loud in the quiet office. Richard wouldn't. Mrs. Preston, I can assure you this is not a mistake. Mr. Preston and I revised this trust structure in June of 2024. He was very specific about his intentions. Sarah gets 25% of the business. Eleanor looked at me. She's not even family. She's married to your son, Whitmore said. As of October 14, 2024, that makes her family under the trust definition. Eleanor stood up. The chair rolled backward and hit the wall. She manipulated him. She used her financial situation to convince him. Mrs. Preston, your husband made this decision before your son's wedding. Before, if I'm reading my notes correctly, the small claims court case in which you sued Ms. Mitchell's family. The room went dead silent. Eleanor was breathing hard now, her chest rising and falling visibly. Jennifer sat frozen, her hands folded on the table. Michael was staring at the document in front of him like he couldn't quite process what he was reading. There's more, Whitmore continued. Per the trust terms, all voting decisions regarding the business require majority agreement among voting stakeholders. Michael Preston holds voting rights for his 25%. Sarah Mitchell Preston holds voting rights for her 25%. Eleanor Preston holds voting rights for her 49%. So I have 49% and they have 50 combined, Eleanor said. I can't make any decisions without them. Correct. Richard did this to punish me. Richard did this, Whitmore said calmly, to ensure the business would be managed strategically rather than emotionally. His words, not mine. Eleanor looked at me, Her face was pale again, the same white it had been in the courthouse. "You knew." "Richard told me his diagnosis," I said. "He didn't tell me the details of the trust until today." "You're lying." "I'm not." She turned to Michael. "You're going to let this happen? You're going to let her take control of your family's business?" "Mom," Michael said quietly, "I don't control what Dad put in the trust. You could contest it." "On what grounds?" Eleanor couldn't answer. She looked around the room, at Whitmore, at the other lawyers, at Jennifer, who was still sitting motionless, at me. Her eyes were wild now, desperate. "This is my company," she said. "I built this with Richard. I ran the finances for 37 years. I know every supplier, every client, every contract." She, pointing at me, "She knows nothing about medical supply distribution." "Actually," I said, and my voice was calm, steady, the same voice I used with clients when explaining complex financial instruments, "I've spent the last 3 months doing comprehensive due diligence on Preston Medical Supply. Revenue analysis, margin evaluation, competitive positioning, supplier contract review. I had my team prepare a full report." I pulled a folder from my bag, set it on the table. "Your supplier contracts are outdated. You're paying 12 to 17% above market rate on your top 5 product lines. Your inventory management system is generating approximately $83,000 in waste annually through poor turnover tracking. Your client retention in the Massachusetts territory has dropped 19% since 2022, and you haven't implemented any systematic recovery program." Eleanor's mouth opened. No sound came out. "I have recommendations," I continued. "Renegotiate the Medline contract. They'll give us better terms. I've already had preliminary conversations. Implement a new inventory system. I'm recommending NetSuite. Implementation cost around $47,000, but ROI within 8 months. Hire a dedicated account manager for Massachusetts, budget $72,000 annually plus commission." These changes alone would improve annual profit by approximately $230,000. Michael was staring at me. "You did all this in 3 months?" "I knew Richard was sick. I knew something was coming. I wanted to be ready." Whitmore was trying not to smile. The other lawyers were taking notes. Eleanor sat down slowly. She looked smaller somehow, like she'd physically shrunk in her chair. "First board meeting is scheduled for September 19th, Whitmore said. 2 weeks from today, all voting stakeholders are required to attend." The meeting ended 10 minutes later. Eleanor left without speaking to anyone. Jennifer followed her, whispering something about calling later. Michael and I stood in the parking lot outside Whitmore's office, in the September heat, humidity making everything feel heavy. "You've been preparing for this," Michael said. "Yes." "Since when?" "Since your father told me about the diagnosis. Since he told me he was making changes to protect the business from your mother's ego. You could have told me." "Your father asked me not to. He wanted to handle it his way." Michael nodded slowly. "She's going to fight this. I know. She's going to make your life hell. She's been doing that for 4 years. I'm used to it." He looked at me for a long moment. "You're not who I thought you were when we met. No one ever is. I mean, you're so much more than I understood." "I know." He kissed me then in the parking lot while the September sun beat down and cars drove past on Summer Street. It felt like forgiveness. It felt like respect. For 11 months, everything was stable. The business flourished under new management. Eleanor fought us on everything, every contract renegotiation, every system upgrade, every hire, but Michael and I voted together, and together we held the majority. By July 2026, we'd improved annual profit by $287,000. Client retention was up. Waste was down. We'd expanded into Rhode Island. Eleanor stopped coming to family dinners. She stopped calling Michael. She communicated strictly through lawyers and terse emails about business matters. I thought it was over. Then yesterday, my lawyer Patricia called, 3:15 in the afternoon. I was in my office, reviewing Q2 numbers with Marcus. "Sarah, we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Eleanor is filing a lawsuit challenging the trust structure. She's claiming Richard wasn't of sound mind when he made the changes in 2024. She's hired a psychiatrist who's prepared to testify that the cancer diagnosis created diminished capacity, that his judgment was impaired, and that the trust should be invalidated and reverted to the previous structure where she inherited his full stake." I sat back in my chair. Marcus looked at me, concerned. "She has medical records?" I asked. "She's subpoenaing them. And Sarah, she's also claiming undue influence. She's arguing that you manipulated Richard into restructuring the trust to benefit yourself. Based on what evidence?" "The timeline. You met him for lunch in June 2024. He changed the trust 2 weeks later. She's claiming you used your financial expertise to convince a dying man to cut his wife out of her rightful inheritance. That's insane. That's what she's arguing. The hearing is scheduled for November 12th. We have 9 weeks to prepare. I hung up. Sat there for a moment, looking at the papers on my desk, the quarterly reports, the client portfolios, the expansion plans. Then I walked to my file cabinet. Second drawer, back left corner, pulled out an envelope I'd been keeping there for 19 months. Inside, a recording, digital file on a USB drive, 47 minutes long. Richard had asked me to record our lunch conversation in June 2024. If she ever tries to claim I wasn't in my right mind, he'd said, I want proof that I was lucid, deliberate, and completely aware of what I was doing. I'd recorded it on my phone. The whole conversation. His voice, clear and strong, explaining exactly why he was restructuring the trust, explaining his concerns about Alina's ego, explaining his confidence in my ability to help protect the business. I am 61 years old, he'd said on the recording. I have been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I am making these changes because I am dying, not in spite of it. I want my business protected. I want my son protected. And I want someone in that boardroom who Alina can't intimidate or control. Sarah Mitchell has proven herself to be exactly that person. I'd been waiting for Alina to do this, waiting for her to claim he wasn't competent, wasn't capable, was somehow diminished by his diagnosis. I'd been ready for this for 19 months. So, what do you think? Did Alina go too far, or was I justified? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more family drama stories.